Hello, everyone. Hi. I hope you all are doing well, having a good Sunday. It's very rainy and cloudy here, so it's kind of cozy in a way. Cozy in a way. Like I feel like I need a cup of tea or something. But yeah, so I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today, we're just going to go ahead and get right to it with episode 44 of Overtures. So exciting. And first, we're also going to start with a clip of my guest doing a monologue.
Wally, I want to ask you a favor.
What is it?
Well, as you may or may not know, I've been doing this online dating service.
Yeah.
And well, I'm gonna have my first date soon.
Okay.
So I was thinking that it'd be nice if you could go with me.
I'm sorry?
Well, it's just... I'm worried that she might be, you know, weird.
Uh-huh.
This way, you'll meet her, size her up, and if you think she passes muster, you'll leave and I'll take your place.
And where will you be?
Me? I'll be the waiter. There's a little coffee house I go to in the mornings. I'm very friendly with the owner. There was a gardening accident, and I found his wife's hand.
Okay.
And of course, I want to hear the rest of the monologue, and I'm sure you guys do too. So make sure to go check out his website when we're done with this. But without further ado, my guest today is an actor, writer, and podcast producer based in New York City. He has worked as an actor in both theater and film, and most recently holding lead roles in the short films Bar Therapy, Sir, We Are Here, and The Eyes of the World, the latter of which won Best Production in the New York True Venture Film Festival. On stage, he has performed off-Broadway at venues such as Carnegie Hall, the Lucille Lortel Theater, Theater Row, and many other locations across New York City and the Mid-Atlantic region. As a writer, he is particularly interested in using theater, film, and media as a gateway to learning about internet, technology, and social media's influence on our decisions, habits, and lifestyles. His brand new musical, The Startup, with music co-written by Kevin Muchetti, explores the influence that big tech has on our world today. The Startup held its first stage reading in November of 2021 at the Chain Theater in Manhattan and is currently in development. So, we've only met in person once, and this episode will honestly be our first full conversation getting to know each other. So I'm excited, and I hope you are too. This is Patrick McAndrew.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. How are you today?
Good. So excited to be on the Overtures podcast.
Amazing. I'm excited to have you on here. I always like to give a little context as like how I know my guests, but the fun part about today is that we don't really know each other.
Oh my gosh.
I
So many mysteries.
So many mysteries. I put out a call for new guests for upcoming episodes on the Villanova Theater alumni page, on my alma mater, Wagner College's group page, and as well as on the Overtures Instagram. And it was funny because then a week or two ago now, we actually met in person, and by complete coincidence.
Yeah. Oh, that was amazing.
I was at work and I was checking you in your group for the rehearsal studios for your most recent reading of the Startup musical.
Yes.
And of
Yeah.
course, we'll chat more in depth about the show later, but how did that particular reading go? How was it?
Oh, it went really well. Yeah, we got some great feedback from a couple producers who came to see the show. And yeah, it was great for me just to since this was our second reading, it was great to see just what still stuck from the first reading and
Yeah.
what changes I made that went well and what changes I made that might not have gone as well. So,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
overall the process went 2 thumbs up, which was great.
Love that. Love that. Was there another reading in between the one from November 2021 and this most recent one?
No.
Oh,
So
that's really exciting then.
yeah, the one we did in November 2021 last year was much bigger to do. We had like a crowdfunding campaign. It was for a general audience.
Ooh.
And yeah, it was 3 weeks of rehearsal. This reading that we did, we only had a couple rehearsals, and then it was just a very casual, informal table reading. So this past reading we
Nice.
just had was much more laid back and chill than the
A
last one.
much less high stakes. It's like a bit more like, okay, I know what we're working with here.
Exactly. Very, very chill, but it went really well.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. And so, of course, from all the different ways that I posted looking for more guests, I found you through Villanova University's alumni page because you also went to Villanova, and I realized I happened to be wearing my Villanova shirt today.
Oh,
So
that's great.
works
That's
out
so
well.
appropriate.
Exactly.
Nice.
I was trying to figure out, what year did you graduate?
Yeah, so I graduated back in 2017. So
Gotcha.
about 5 years ago now, which is crazy. The time has just flown by. What year did you graduate?
2021, actually.
Oh,
So
wow.
I
So
was 2019 to 21.
you were in the thick of COVID then. That
I
had to be
sure
rough.
was. It really was. Transitioning suddenly from like the full Villanova like experience, as I'm sure you've enjoyed, like with like going in like Vasey and so many in person, constantly doing things, people doing like thesis projects or solo or directing scenes, to suddenly being like, okay, I guess we're all on Zoom now. But then we also very quickly pivoted to working with the communications department and doing like more film based things. So we were
Oh,
doing
that's pretty cool.
Zoom productions, but like we were taking home full mic setups and we were plugging them all into our computers and putting them in places so that we were getting like the high quality like audio and things like that, and things
Oh,
were being
that's
edited
great.
together. So it was really cool experience and getting to like a taste of film in a theater master's program, which I wasn't expecting, but I definitely
Right.
missed that like first semester atmosphere of like, oh, this is what it's like for all of us to be constantly around each other, because Villanova just really
Right.
fosters that.
Yeah.
um,
Did you get to be in the new Performing Arts Center there at all?
Yes. So I did all of my second year classes in there. We never did a production in person for an audience in there, but Kara Scaramazza, who I believe you went to school with, directed me in Songs for a New World, which was completely filmed, but we did the final song. I think it's called Hear My Song. I should remember that, but I shouldn't, but I don't. We did that whole finale song together in person, but masked
Oh,
in the
wow.
new performing art in the new theater. So that was really cool because
Oh,
we
I
kind of
think I
felt like we
saw
were like
I
christening the
think I
theater
s
in a way.
Yeah, I think I might was it recorded? Because I think I saw a
Yeah.
recording of it. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
amazing.
It was so cool and such a weird experience, but absolutely loved it. And then they did a play called The Scar Test over in the Black Box Theater. And then Slap Happy, our devised movie that Valerie worked with all of us on, was all over the building, all over the place. So we all got a
Oh, that's
chance to
great.
like get to know the building, which was really, really nice. And then you also went to school with Chris Monaco,
Oh
who
my
was a
gosh,
guest
yes.
a few episodes ago now.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to see the video you posted. I'm a big Chris Monaco fan. He's amazing. I'm so glad that you were able to get him on the show.
No, me too. It was wonderful because I actually met him doing a reading with Villanova that they were like, yeah, some alumni, if you want to come back and do it too. So like we had a scene or two together, but like we never really chatted outside of the scenes themselves. So it was cool to like actually get to know him as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious, what led you to pursuing a master's degree and why Villanova? Because it's such a specific, unique program.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I went to school for undergrad at a small liberal arts college called Ursinus College, which actually isn't too far away from Villanova. It's still in the
Okay.
Philadelphia region.
Mm-hmm.
And so I studied theater there, had this amazing experience. But as most people find themselves when graduating from college at the age of 22, you're
Yes.
not really sure what to do or what to pursue, even if what you ended up studying was something that was very fulfilling.
Yeah.
So even though I studied theater in undergrad, at that time, just because, as you know, theater is just this topsy-turvy world,
Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure how seriously I should pursue it. And so I ended up getting a full-time job actually at the college working in admissions as
Oh,
an
wow.
admission counselor. And while I was doing that, I was doing theater on the side. And especially as I started to do more and more theater, I was like, man, I got to get back into doing this. I just wanted to be involved with it at any capacity at that point.
Yeah.
Because after I had graduated, at least for a little while, I felt so removed from the world.
Yeah.
And it was rough. It was rough. Yeah, I was thankful that I had a job, and it was actually a very good job to have. But that, as I'm sure you understand, there was that emptiness that I was feeling.
Yeah.
And so I had actually known somebody who was at my college who went to Villanova, Kristen Mandrakia, which I think
Yes.
you actually
Yeah, I
chatted with.
had her on a few
Yeah,
episodes ago
yeah.
too.
And so I knew that she was currently at Villanova. Something that I really loved about Villanova a lot is that it allowed you to experience kind of all aspects of theater.
Mhm.
So it wasn't only acting classes. You also kind of had this scholarly side to the
Yeah.
discipline, which I really appreciated a lot. Not only that, but Villanova also gave the opportunity for assistantships and scholarships,
Yeah, that was a
which
huge one for so many people.
exactly. And for me, just because I was in a position where I did have some student debt, I didn't want to go to grad school and accumulate a lot more debt.
Exactly.
So I had the opportunity. I talked with my professor, my old professor at Ursinus about it. He gave me some great insights into the program. And then I met with Kristen and learned more about the program. And I was like, okay, I think this could be a good fit. I ended up going to the school and through Kristen, actually, she set up a meeting with me with Father David Cregan, who was the chair of the department at the
The
time.
time. Yeah.
And after my conversation with him, I was like, oh, I think this is the program for me. I
Yeah.
actually didn't apply anywhere else. I
Mm.
just applied to Villanova, and it was this mindset of, if it works out, great, it's going to be this awesome adventure, and if not, then I'll figure out what's next after that. It
Yeah.
was the only place I applied because I felt that strongly about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I was very lucky and fortunate. I ended up getting one of the assistantships. And then after all those stars aligned, I was like, okay, yeah, this is for me.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible 2 years.
What
Absolutely loved it.
what assistantship did you have?
Yeah, I was one of the set and lighting assistants.
Yeah.
So, which was amazing because
Mhm.
I had a little bit of experience with that stuff, just that I had done in undergrad, but not to the extent that I ended up doing once I was at
Oh,
Villanova. So
absolutely.
yeah, I learned so much, and it was awesome to get that perspective, because I found that in my other work, whether I was performing in a show or whether I was in a playwriting class or something like that, my work as a set and lighting assistant just it gave me a more well-rounded perspective of everything that goes into creating theater, which was another reason why I loved Villanova so much.
Totally. And I had worked in the set and prop shop as like a work study
Oh,
in my second
nice.
semester of my second year. And that was so great because I had experience like working in the shop at like undergrad and like very, very little in high school, but like working in it like full throttle like you do at Villanova. Like again, I also learned so much. And so it's funny working at a stage door and like tech people come by and are like, hi, like I noticed your like assistant technical director isn't here. Can you tell them that I need blah, blah, blah gobos and like listing all of these like lighting parts? And I'll be like, yeah, I know what that is. And can like
Yeah.
write that stuff down and like know what
Yeah.
that involves.
Like,
So
oh
it's
yeah, I know the language and the lingo. And
exactly.
well, and you probably got to work in the new scene shop that they have at the theater. It
Yeah.
looks amazing. Yeah,
It's
it's beautiful.
gigantic. Oh my gosh. It felt like it felt almost like felt bad like starting in there because I'm like everything's so pretty that I'm like, am I allowed to work in here? Like, shouldn't this be covered in paint already? But we were the ones covering it in paint for the first time. So
Oh, that's
it
great.
was very fun to get to kind of like inaugurate it in that way.
Yeah, I
Um,
bet.
but yeah, so I'm also curious since like as we were saying, Villanova allows you to like pursue so many like hats and paths and like get to really go into like anything you wanted. What did you do for your thesis?
Yeah, I did a solo performance thesis.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. What was great about Villanova as well, and actually a lot of the students said this to me in my first semester there, was that because when I went into Villanova, as I mentioned before, I just wanted to be involved in the theater in any
Yeah, you're like, give
capacity
me anything. I
whatsoever.
don't care at this
Yeah,
point.
exactly. And what a lot of the students, especially those who are in their second year, would say is that because you have the opportunity to be exposed to so many facets of theater, you'll begin to develop an understanding of what areas you want to focus in.
Yeah,
And so for me, what was great about that is that it gave me a deeper clarity that performance was kind of where I was gravitating towards more
yeah,
so than anything else. And so yeah, when I went into my second year, I was just looking at my options. I was cast in a production of Elektra, which, Kara was Elektra,
yeah,
and I played Orestes. And so I had an opportunity to do to do an acting thesis. I was also very interested in the academic side of what we were learning. So for a while, I was going to consider an academic thesis as
mm,
well. But then I ended up deciding to go with the solo performance thesis just because I saw that as something, because at the time, and still, I'm not as much interested in pursuing a PhD. So I
mhm.
wanted to look at something that I could create and potentially take with me beyond Villanova.
I've heard a
So
lot
that's
of that same sentiment from others who like did a solo thesis. Like, this is something that I can use and take with me and grow further.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I ended up developing a solo performance piece. And especially after taking the solo performance class, like that sold me on the whole idea of solo performance. That was an amazing class.
Did you have
And
it with Michael?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was
that'll
yeah.
definitely do
Oh
it.
my gosh, it was amazing. It was amazing. And just
Yeah.
seeing everybody's work and performances that they put together every week was so much fun. I especially loved it was like the Secret Santa assignment
Oh, we
where
have that. Tell me about
well,
it.
maybe it had a different name, but it
That's okay.
essentially was you got assigned a random name of someone
Mhm.
in the class and then you had to write a solo performance for them, and then they wrote a solo performance, then someone else wrote a solo performance for you. So Michael handed out all of these random scripts and you don't know who wrote it, and you just have to perform it. As a performer, you memorize the script and put it up. And so it was always fun figuring out, oh, who wrote whose and all of
Yeah.
that. So that was a
Oh,
blast.
that's amazing. We did not have that,
Oh
nor
my.
I also don't think, like, I've heard of that assignment, like, in the years previous or after me, so that's really cool. I hope he brings
Oh
that
man.
back because
Oh, he
that's
needs
so
to.
fun.
I'm
Oh my
very
gosh.
surprised that he took it out. Maybe it
He
had
might
something to
have
do with COVID or something.
he
I
might
don't
have
know.
traded it out because I know a big project for us was research theft, and maybe that was something you guys did or didn't do. So we can chat about that later on our own time.
Right, right.
But yeah, and I'm also curious, when did you move out to New York City?
Yeah, so I moved the summer after I graduated. So my thesis for solo performance was this solo show called Real, which was essentially this. I explored as a solo performer what happens to my relationship with the audience when technology comes into play. So very much themes that inform a lot of the other work that I do.
Yeah.
And so I moved up to New York the summer after graduating. So I think it was only like a month or two later.
Mhm.
And I brought the solo performance up and ended up performing in a festival up in New York called the United Solo Theater Festival.
I'm very familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was a great experience. And it was just, for me, it was a great transition to living in New York
Yeah.
because I went up and I had gotten accepted to the festival before I moved. So
Mm.
it kind of gave me this nice transition into the city of being like, okay, I'm moving up to New York. I
Yeah.
have my solo show that I'm going to be doing in this festival. I'll start there and then, we're off to the races after that.
Absolutely, as opposed to, like, moving in cold and you're like, "Oh god, I don't know anyone, I don't even know where to start." Like, you're like,
Right.
"Okay, I'm going there and I have this thing on the calendar already." Like, I know that that's so helpful in sort of, like, gearing to go
Oh,
once you get here into
exactly.
the city.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because as you know, it's very much a love-hate city where there's times where it's absolutely amazing living in New
Mhm.
York City, especially pursuing the arts.
Yeah.
And then there's times where you're like, I just want to leave the city right now.
You're like,
Want
"Oh, it'd
to
be so much easier out somewhere else."
right. So yeah, so it really was a great opportunity for me to just uh, perform in the city and to be able to transition to that lifestyle.
Absolutely, and kind of going back to the beginnings of things for you, how did you first get started in theater?
Yes. So going back to college at Ursinus College, I had actually never done theater before college. So
Interesting. My partner is
yeah.
the exact same way, also a Villanova grad, so I think there's
Oh,
something
great.
there.
Yeah. So in high school, just for whatever reason, I had thought, it's funny because I think back and there were many times where I thought about getting involved in theater.
Mhm.
But at least as a performer, and it's very ironic now because I've written a musical, but as a performer, I'm not like a big musical theater performer.
Mhm.
I primarily act in straight plays, short films, and things like that. And so obviously for many high schools, musical theater is like the big thing. And I was a hardcore band geek. I was all about marching band. That's where like all my friends were.
Yeah,
And so I think I was just comfortable in there. And even though I had that interest in theater, I was just very happy being in marching band and doing all of that. So, first semester of college, my freshman year, I was like, hey, college, new experiences. I'm going to audition for this play and see what happens. I got very lucky. I ended up getting cast.
mm.
I didn't have any lines or anything like that. I was not a good actor. And it's actually funny because a few years later, my senior year, my professor, he was like, yeah, when you auditioned for that play, you weren't a great actor, but you came in with a good attitude. You had a positive attitude. And so so I'm glad I had that at least.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so but even though I didn't have any lines or anything and had this opportunity to perform in what little way I knew how to perform at that time, it was incredible. I like just being backstage, hearing the audience murmuring
Yeah.
outside, and I was looking around and the blue lights are on in the
Mhm.
backstage area and the curtain's about to rise and I'm sitting on, one of the sets and the curtain's about to rise and everything. And there was just something that was so amazing about it, so intoxicating.
Yeah.
And So from there, I continued to audition. I auditioned the next semester and got a part again. This time I had a couple of lines.
Hey, there we go. Moving up.
Yeah, yeah. And then it was, I think, either towards the end of my freshman year or beginning of my sophomore year, I started taking theater classes. And then by the end of my sophomore year, I was fully invested. I was theater major and,
Yeah,
on my way. I caught the bug, so to speak.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so that's how I got that started into it. It was
Yeah.
something was just telling me to audition, and I'm very lucky that I got that part. It really changed my life in a lot of ways, which is
Yeah.
at that moment you don't think about that. You don't think about, oh yeah, I'm just doing this play.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna
Yeah,
audition and see what happens. But
exactly.
it's fun now in retrospect to reflect back on that.
Absolutely. And something that, well, the namesake of this podcast being Overtures, I'm curious what in there, maybe it was that first role, maybe it was later on, was there a particular overture moment or like light bulb of like, oh, but this is what I actually want to pursue from now on?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. What's interesting is I think while I was in college, I was just so entranced in the moment that, and I think this explains why when I graduated, I wasn't 100% sure what my path was,
Yeah.
because just thinking back, I could be wrong. I'm sure I thought about what was going to be next after college. I had to have thought about that. But I think I was just so focused on what I was doing in the moment that I don't think there was a specific moment where I was like, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life." I
Yeah.
knew that it was just something that I was really passionate about, I really loved doing, and I was very curious to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Whether I was taking an acting class or whether I was performing in a show, there was just this curiosity about it, and there had never been anything that had grabbed my attention so much
Mm,
as theater and acting and performing.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know if it was a specific moment. I do know my second semester sophomore year, I had this opportunity to perform in a improv show called Playing Favorites. And at the school, we had like a regular student-led improv troupe.
Mhm.
But for this second semester sophomore year, this improv show was actually one of the main stage shows. They brought
Mhm.
in an amazing improv facilitator and teacher called Bobby Block, who came in and she cast a show of 10 actors. I was lucky enough to get cast in that. And she trained us in long form, what's called serio-comic improv.
That's hard. That long
Yeah,
form
yeah,
is so hard.
yeah, yeah. And so it was very intensive. We rehearsed a lot for it, which is funny because it's improv. So I think
You
the
don't
average
feel like,
person's like,
yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. But for this specific show, we rehearsed a lot, and I just remember being in some of those scenes and moments where it just felt so real,
Mhm.
and I tapped into something as an actor that I had never done before that.
Yeah.
And so I think in some ways that was kind of a light bulb moment for me where I thought, "Oh, this is something that I could do. This is something there's something about theater and about acting and performing that feels very visceral and
Mhm.
tangible." And that struck a chord with me a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't know if it was one specific moment, but I
Mhm.
think it was just a series of little moments
Yeah,
that at least
absolutely.
led to where I'm at, today.
Well, no, that makes sense, and I think that it's funny because I think the improv, story that you had there, I think that also speaks to the fact that you're both a performer and a writer, and how, like, you're actively creating something as you're doing it, but also in terms of acting, you've done theater, but you've also done some film and some, like, short films here and there. Did you always have an interest in doing both, or did film kind of, like, sneak up on you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, film was something I was always curious about, but when I was in undergrad, as many academic programs are, all the focus is on theater. So
Absolutely.
that's just naturally where all my focus was at. But way back when in 2014 at Ursinus College,
Mhm.
they actually filmed the pilot for How to Get Away with Murder, which was which
Incredible.
yeah, so I had the opportunity to be a background actor for that. I had never
Nice.
been a background actor before, but to be on a professional set, even just as a background actor, and to see everything going on, it
It's
was so
wild.
yeah, it's amazing. It's so cool just to see everything that's happening, everything that's just goes into putting up a production. And I had
Mhm.
never witnessed the creation of film like that before. I had made very stupid, silly films and stuff in like high school
Yeah.
and things like that before, which actually through those silly films was something that sort of got me curious about theater.
Yeah.
But anyways, so that sort of aspect got me interested in film. I went to school at Villanova, as you know.
Mhm.
Obviously, the focus, at least in my time there, was completely on theater.
Absolutely.
Graduated, and then it wasn't until New York that I started to really explore the film scene a lot. A
Yeah.
lot of it actually had to do with the fact that I'm not a musical theater performer.
Mm.
And because musical theater is so heavy in New York,
Totally.
looking at developing a skill set in film would be advantageous for me just
Yeah.
because it opens up more work opportunities.
Yeah.
And so I started taking some on-camera acting classes and started auditioning for films as well. And so that's how I really started to get into the film world and started developing an idea of how that whole ecosystem works and kind of
Yeah.
the similarities between acting in film and acting in theater. What I will say about film that I still feel very, very similar about is, unlike theater, where especially when I went into Villanova, I was just interested in all aspects of theater, everything that went into it, acting, directing,
Mhm.
set and lighting design,
Yeah.
all aspects. With film, and I felt this when I was a background actor, but then even as I started working as just a regular actor in short films and things like that, and I still feel this way, that this could change over time. But I'm very interested and passionate about acting in film, but I don't think there's anything else in the film world that I would want to do except maybe
Yeah.
writing. But just seeing everything come together and the amount of hours that are put in as well,
Yeah.
like 12, 14, 16-hour days, you really have to have a deep passion for, or at least if you don't have a deep passion, if you're like a production assistant, for example,
Like the
you have
stamina.
a yeah, you have to have the stamina and the vision for where you want to end up.
Yeah.
There's a reason why you're working that job. And so
100%.
for me, it became very clear, at least in the film world, that yes, I love acting. I love the intricacies that are involved in acting for film, but I wouldn't want to do anything else just because it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think in the film world, I could only bring that sort of stamina to acting just because of how passionate I am about it.
No, I'm the exact same way. I've been doing work with central casting, so going out to like do background work every now and then. And like I'm the exact same way. I'm like, I would hate to be doing all of those other things. I like totally respect what the amazing work everyone else is doing on that set, but like,
Oh yeah.
wow, I'm exhausted waiting around just so before the next shot where I just like walk in the background, let alone doing all this
Right.
incredible work that everyone else is
It's
doing.
amazing. And I mean, that's one of the things I love about working in film is that there's so much excitement that's going
Yeah.
on around you. Everyone has their job and responsibility, and it's boom, 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 boom. And there's something that's very exhilarating about that. So I'm really glad that I've started to work in the film arena as
Yeah.
well, because yeah, it's different than theater in a lot of ways, but I love it. I feel it like just as much. I
Yeah.
love them for different reasons, I'd say.
Exactly, and they're, like, also different kind of acting muscles too, but, like,
Yeah.
getting to play parts in either one, it, like, helps you learn things that end up helping in the other, and
Yeah.
kind of going along that same route too, you write, was that something that you obviously theater is something that became newer to you in college. Did you experience writing in college, or did you begin with that at Villanova?
Yeah, so it's funny, in college and undergrad, I did do a little bit of writing. I For essentially my capstone, which is more or less kind of like the thesis in undergrad, at least it
Right.
was at my school. I wrote and developed and then produced a children's play called The Get Better Letter. And it was
Aw.
a lot of fun. It rhymed and everything. And we performed it at the school library. So a lot of the
Oh.
professors who had young kids brought their kids, and we performed at a daycare as well. So it was a lot of fun. And in that specific moment of my journey, I was very interested in just what goes into creating children's theater, and how do we make it appealing for young kids whose attention spans are just
Yeah,
all over
it's
the place.
all
E
movement.
Exactly, exactly. So that was a great experience. So that was really my first experience with regards to writing theater. And then it was put on hold before grad school because I was really just doing acting in between.
Right.
And then in grad school, I started writing a bit more, especially once I had my thesis. I mean, I took the playwriting class with Michael, and then
Yeah.
solo performance. So those were incredible. What's the word? I guess they were just incredible vessels to be able to explore writing, and what that does for me, and how I could use it in my career.
Mhm.
And so then I developed the solo performance. Once I went to New York, I wrote another solo show that was kind of an expansion of one that I did in the solo class.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then at the beginning of 2019, so about 3.5 years ago, was when I started writing this musical. And all while all this was happening, when I moved to New York, I started blogging about technology, and how it how it influences the ways in which we interact with each other as human beings,
Yeah.
how it's helping or hurting humanity, something
Yeah.
that I'm very interested and passionate about. So I was blogging about that actually as my solo show was going up in New York, and then that was something that I continued doing. I ended up starting a podcast about it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that work, my work in the tech realm and starting to meet a lot of people in that space, has started to inform a lot of my creative work. And so that was sort of the impetus of what ended up creating the musical that I'm doing now.
Well, and I can imagine also with the onset of the pandemic, like, especially with thinking about, like, theater and technology and media and all those ways, I'm sure all of those came to play in a way that, like, even you as someone, like, interested in those things could watch that all unfold and be like, "Wow, these are the amazing ways we're combining all of this stuff."
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that so much of my work is at the intersection of theater and technology, and what it could do for us. But then
Mhm.
also, I think sometimes theater is kind of like this antithesis to technology, where it's a big reason why I love theater so much, is that I think it allows us to empathize with one another and really connect with each other as humans, unlike sometimes I think all of us being in our screens sometimes does.
Yeah.
So it's interesting sort of finding that balance between the two, for sure.
Yeah, and you also had, like, previously mentioned, like, before coming on the podcast, how, like, theater can be so healing, and like, it kinda, like, breaks open that, like, constant screen time and that kind of thing. Like, you get that chance to, like, be with other humans, and I'm sure you can speak to that a little bit better than I can, but, um
Yeah, I think a big reason why I'm drawn to theater to acting, I guess more specifically,
Mhm.
is that even though when you're acting and performing, you're pretending to be someone else, there's this, I'm going to use the word that I used before, this visceral nature to it,
Yeah.
this tangibility that doesn't exist when we're looking at our screens, when we're looking, down at our phones, or if we're on our computers all day.
Yeah.
That there's a realness to it, even though it is, more or less playing
Yeah.
pretend. And it's, I think a big reason why it's so important to me is because it, I think, could only help our society better understand one another, and better empathize with one another, and better learn from each other, and learn about someone who's completely different from yourself, and and also find a commonality too. I think that as technology continues to advance, and in so many ways technology can be polarizing a lot of the times, I think that theater and performance and storytelling is just going to become even more important. And so
Absolutely.
that's a big reason why I'm very invested in this, in theater, and being an actor, because I feel like I'm more or less seeing myself as sort of an ambassador for humanity.
Yeah.
And and saying that, okay, this is how we keep ourselves grounded. This is how we are able to understand one another. And there's just something that's so real about that really resonates with me a lot.
Mhm.
And the ability to storytell and be able to share stories, that's in that way, that's what's kind of gotten me interested in writing, is to be able to share my message through creative work, through storytelling. And
Mhm.
so that's where I'm at in my career right now, is
Yeah.
just trying to get these messages out there.
Well, absolutely, and you're doing a great job with it, because I mean, heck, you're also a podcast producer,
Yes, yeah.
and so one of your podcasts, which I believe has, like, completed its entire series, but has a whopping 200 episodes.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that was certainly a labor of love, but it was a
Yeah.
great it was I really enjoyed it a lot. When I was transitioning from writing and doing the blogging, I had developed a small follower of followers of people who had read the blog.
Mhm.
And I threw out this idea to them, like, "Hey, how would you feel about a podcast?" And a lot of them said, "Oh yeah, we would listen, sure." So I started creating a podcast, and as you know, through having your own podcast, there's a
Yeah.
lot of trial and error, figuring out what works,
Absolutely.
just learning the whole process. And so this podcast, which had one name initially, but then I changed it to Relate, was all about figuring out ways in which how we could relate to one another in the
Yeah.
digital age. So I talked to a lot of people in the entertainment industry, actually, but I also had a lot of people in the tech space, people who were working in a field known as digital wellness. So figuring out, how do we create more meaningful and mindful relationships with how we're using technology instead of technology using us.
Yeah.
So I interviewed a lot of people who are doing a lot of cool work in that space. And then also had a handful of solo episodes with just myself, spewing my thoughts on a wide variety of different topics related to that. So yeah, it was a great experience. And I think what's been great about it, and why I'm such a believer in podcasting as well, in addition to acting and writing,
Yeah.
and today's is an example of this, is that it sets up this medium to be able to have a meaningful conversation with somebody who you've just met,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
learn about who they are, and create that connection. And podcasting's such a great medium because it allows someone to listen to a conversation that goes deep. that
Mhm.
really allows someone to just get a deeper understanding of humanity, no matter what the topic is about.
Yeah.
So that was a great, worthwhile endeavor. And yeah, and then I decided to wrap production on it at the end of last year after 200 episodes.
Yeah, and kind of going back a little bit, talking about like podcasting and such. Like even just the ways it is another form of storytelling too, because you get to have those deep, meaningful conversations with people. But I always, as a host, I personally always get so excited when someone's like, "Oh, that reminds me of this thing," and then can go on and tell this story that perhaps we wouldn't have necessarily heard in everyday conversation, because we're creating this space to like sit down and talk about a very like niche or non-niche topic. And it can give some like really wonderful like words of wisdom that you wouldn't expect, or just like, oh, I actually have been through something so similar. That's crazy. And theater in many ways does those exact same things.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. I think, and to go back to what you were saying about the pandemic, even though I had started my podcast before the pandemic started,
Mhm.
podcasting was really my saving grace
It
when the
blew up.
pandemic hit. Yeah, and because I was acting in a show and assistant directing a show, and once the pandemic hit, that
Yeah.
wasn't happening anymore.
Mm-mm.
And so, in addition to my own podcast, I started helping some others start their own podcasts as well,
Yeah.
because it was this medium that you could do remotely. And I think you hit the nail on the head with saying it's this other form of storytelling. And so I think a lot of times that resonates with people. And there are so many podcasts out there
Yeah.
that
Some are fictional and quite literally storytelling.
right, right. There's so many podcasts out there, which is great because I think that there is a podcast out there for everyone, for people who are interested in podcasts. Some people are
Yeah.
like, oh no, I don't want to listen to podcasts, but for those out there, there's a podcast for everyone. I heard recently of this amazing podcast called Overtures. You might have heard of it. Uh, but yeah, it's this. I think that podcasting is just as you were saying, an amazing medium for storytelling for sure.
Absolutely. And since then you've started another podcast, Actorcast. And this one
Yes.
only started like last year? How like
Yeah, it
where
was the
yeah.
beginning of 2021.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah.
so what happened with that is that was more or less, even though obviously I'm passionate about acting, that's a big passion of mine.
Yeah.
I started that podcast because my Relate podcast, just through where the conversations were going, kind of ended up being two different podcasts.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when I'd have people from the entertainment industry on, I would be asking them a bunch of questions about their career, and kind of the
Yeah.
conversation went in a different direction than about relating to each other in the digital age and our relationships to technology.
Yeah.
So that's a big reason why I created Actorcast, is I decided to create another show that was specifically focused on uh, learning more about the entertainment industry from experts who work in the field. And yeah, more so like as a resource for fellow actors out there, because as I'm sure as you know, it's a very sort of, I don't know if this is the right word, but like nebulous world where it's just very confusing how things work in the
It's I
industry.
No, truly, it's a lot of times in many ways, it's like kind of you learn the etiquette and the way of going about things or how certain things work by word of mouth, which isn't always helpful if you don't know where to find it. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. And from I was like scrolling through, and I cannot wait to start listening, because there's such amazing episodes on there talking to experts, but also just advice on very particular topic. It's really
Yeah.
valuable resources that people can listen to.
Right, right. And so yeah, so that's why I ended up creating Actorcast, was really an opportunity to provide a resource for people, fellow actors out
Yeah.
there, and help them learn about the industry, because I'm still learning. There's still so much to
Same.
learn. So in a selfish way, it's like I'm having these guests on and I'm asking them questions that I'm also curious about.
Yeah.
And so my hope is with that show that everyone could benefit. And that's another reason why I love podcasting, if I could go on and on, is that
Yeah.
it's a win-win for everyone involved.
Yeah.
So as a host of the podcast, you have a guest on the show. It's a great opportunity for them because they could promote the show. They could say, hey, I was
Yeah.
on this podcast. It's a great opportunity for you because it's like, oh, I'm getting to connect and meet with this new person.
Mhm.
And then the people who tune in, it's a great opportunity for them to listen to what's hopefully an interesting conversation.
Yeah,
But at the very
exactly.
least, hopefully they'll learn something and take something away from it as well.
Totally, totally. And where can people go listen to Relate if they want to find some really cool episodes or like upcoming episodes of Actorcast?
Yeah. So it's still available. Relate is still available on all the major listening platforms. So all you have to do is search for Relate with Patrick McAndrew and it should pop up. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you could check it
Yeah.
out. And same thing with Actorcast as well. Actorcast, I also have a website for actorcast.fm. So if you go there, it's, I guess, a more direct way of being able to check out all the episodes and read information. And we have a couple different videos as well from some of the episodes on there too. So you could go
Amazing.
right to the website for that. But Relate doesn't have a website, so you will have to go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So yeah, check it out. Check it out. Leave us
Yes.
a review.
Yeah, absolutely. Go listen. Go listen. Okay, we're finally going to talk about The Startup, which I'm so excited to hear about. A musical written by yourself and Kevin Muccetti. First of all, what is it all about?
Yes, that's a great question. It's been evolving, but overall, it's about these two siblings, Chip and Maddie, who they founded a social media company called Kazoo. And as we enter into the musical, it's really becoming apparent that Kazoo, it's growing all of these users, and they're trying to decide what the best path forward is for the company. Uh, there's some issues with regards to how some of the younger users are using their app. Some potentially dangerous situations with how they're using technology. There's another woman who comes in named Monique, who has a lot of expertise as like a tech critic. So she's kind of giving her insights into it as well. And essentially what the show explores is, will Chip and Maddie follow the rules of what big tech has done in the past, or will they forge their own path and really set a new precedent for how technology and social media is made? Is it going to continue to exploit the data and attention of its users, or is there some other option that they could go towards, while still making it an enjoyable platform for the people who use it? So
Amazing.
yeah, that's what the show explores. It's been
Yeah.
so much fun working on. The music has been so much fun to write and put together as well. It's not like a specific style of music, I would say. A lot
That's
of
okay.
times people will ask me like, oh, what kind of music is it in the startup? And it's not a specific style. There's some that are, some more jazzy type songs, some that are a little bit more traditional musical theater. There's some songs that are just completely weird and out there. And so it's been interesting to kind of see the ebb and flow and the evolution of the show. So our hope is to, at some point next year, put up a workshop production of it. So stay tuned. We'll see how that evolves.
Amazing, amazing. And then I'm curious, where did what came first, like the idea for the musical or the partnership between you and Kevin? Did you guys both create it together? How did this come about?
Yeah, so really the idea came to me in that I wanted to create a show that, when I first wrote the show, the first version of the show, I wanted to explore how technology was, essentially how it was being created, and for better or worse,
Mhm.
at kind of a big level. So that in my mind kind of came to, okay, going to a startup, a social media startup, and
Yeah.
what is kind of the inner workings that go on there that then lead down to our day-to-day interactions with it. And so in addition to that sort of A story, I also had a B story that kind of followed these two families and sort of their interaction with this social media and how it was impacting their lives on
Mm.
a daily basis. Since then, I've now focused everything to the startup, to Kazoo, because a lot of the feedback I got was like, it's kind of seems like it's two plays going on.
Uh,
So that's where I focus the attention now. But yeah, it was more so what was interesting is that I wanted to create this show, and I had a very rough outline of it, but it kind of came as I was writing it. So I was writing it and just kind of seeing where it went. And it's important to note too that the songs actually came, or a lot of the songs, not all of the songs, a lot of the songs came before the script.
mm,
So I had written all of the songs or most of the songs, and I knew because I'm not, a composer in the traditional sense. I'm a
right.
musician, but I knew that I would need help developing the songs.
Yeah.
So that's when I went to Kevin, and Kevin is this amazingly talented composer and musician, music director as well. And so this actually happened right after COVID, like right when COVID hit, that I
Mhm.
approached Kevin and I was like, "Hey, so I've written this musical, but I need a little help with writing the music. Would you be interested in collaborating with me on this?" And I obviously couldn't have written it without him because he was
Mhm.
really able to take these ideas, these melodies and rhythms that were in my head and put them into reality.
Mm.
And so it's been this amazing process working with Kevin, and to be able to see these songs come alive has
Yeah.
been one of the most rewarding parts of writing this show. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so I mean the show is still in development, so it will likely still change a lot. We had a few songs in this second reading that we did that were cut from the original. We also
Mm.
wrote a few new songs as well. So so yeah, it's been this fun endeavor. And I think shortly after I started writing it, I told myself, okay, this is going to be a very long-term project.
Yeah.
I'm sure, anyone who's written or developed a musical of any kind, or even a play, or any sort of creative work, knows that it's a long process from getting it to that first word on the page to wherever it ends up going.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been this incredible experience, and it's taught me a lot about myself as a writer too. When I was first writing the show, I was considering performing in it, but
Mm.
after a while, I was like, okay, that's not what this show needs. I think I think I'm best able to serve this show that's being created by just focusing on the writing.
Mhm.
And so it's been this kind of fun journey to figure out how to tell a story, and how to tell a story that's going to resonate with people, because that was a big reason why I started writing this musical, is that I wanted to create something that people could think about, that could reach a wide audience as well. I think there were some, while I was very proud of my solo show, there were a lot of limitations that I found after I had done my performance in New York, that
Mhm.
and that was more so how I had written it. It was very, very technical,
Yeah.
and there were a lot of technical elements involved with it. And in grad school, where you have a lot of resources, I was able to do it effectively there. And even though I was proud of the performance in New York, I knew that there was just a lot going on to be able to, within that specific show, to
Yeah.
be able to, just make it a regular thing. And
Totally.
so I wanted to create a show with more people involved, that could have and that could reach an even wider audience. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, so that's where we're at right now. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see where it continues going. I'll be sure to keep you posted for sure.
Yeah, no, please let me know. And I'm sure it's been so amazing and rewarding to hear your words and your music coming from other people in these workshops and readings.
Oh yeah.
And I'm so curious, as a writer, what are you looking for when you're listening to your work being read or sung by others? Because obviously, from my personal perspective, I've gotten a little bit more used to hearing other people say dialogue that I've written and going from there and trying to edit. But I can imagine it's a whole different thing when it's music that you've written and you're like,
Yeah.
what are you listening for to be like, that is or isn't landing?
Right, right. Oh my gosh, it's so funny when Kevin and I are working on the music for some of the songs. Some of the songs like they just come naturally, and Kevin is such a talented musician and composer that there's some song that I would propose to him and he just plays it and that's it, and it's like his bread and butter, and it just clicks. And then there's some songs that are very much more intricate and have a lot going on with them. And so once we get the song to a place that we're happy with as the writers, we're like, who knows if like people are going to be able to sing this song, or like who knows if this is going to work. And like the cast that we've had for this show, they're incredible. They're just such talented performers. And so when they do sing the song, it's like, oh my gosh, this works. Is this is actually something that's doable. This
Yeah.
song that we've created, it's actually something that could exist. So as a writer, when I'm listening to either the dialogue or to the music, I guess specifically with the dialogue, I'm figuring out if the tone of the dialogue is where I want it to be. So is what's being said kind of harsh? Is it kind of mean? Is it just right? Is it too nice?
Yeah.
And figuring out, okay, does that fit the character? Does that fit what I want the character to be, what I want the character to represent in this show?
Yeah.
Is the character essentially serving its purpose or their purpose through the dialogue that's being said? And then in addition to that, I've also put a handful of comedy in the show too. So it's figuring out what jokes land, what jokes don't, what
Of course.
works, what's funny, what are things that I thought were funny, and then just nobody laughs at all. And so figuring from that perspective as well. So I think it's timing and the rhythm of the
Yeah.
words as well is something I really listen to a lot. I'm a drummer, so when it comes to rhythm, that's something that I'm just very attuned to,
Yeah.
especially when people are talking. So as a writer, that's something that I listen for a lot. With regards to the music, I think it's more so is are the lyrics one jiving with the kind of overall melody and actual music of the song. So that's one aspect. And then another aspect is kind of more the technical side of it all. Kevin would be the first one to tell you that sometimes my lyrics are a little too wordy. And so when I hear someone sing, I'm like, oh man, I did not give them the opportunity to breathe at this moment. Or like sometimes there's so many syllables, and when I'm hearing it in my head, sometimes I'm hearing it more of like kind of like a spoken word sort of thing. And but then once we put it to music, it's actually being sung, and then sometimes it doesn't work. So there's also that technical sort of aspect that I'm listening to as well. And then also just figuring out does the story, or does the story of the song fit within the story of the play or the
Yeah.
musical, and does it also resonate on its own too? Is there a purpose for it? And does it, kind of like what I was saying with the characters and the dialogue, does that serve its goal? Does the song also serve its purpose? And so yeah, so that's why for this new reading, for example, you cut songs and you're like, oh, I really love this song. There was one song that was very difficult for me to cut, but in the new version of this script, it didn't really work.
Yeah.
I think it might have been Lin-Manuel Miranda who said that he could create a whole other album of songs that he had in Hamilton, or maybe it was
Yeah.
in The Heights, that were just cut from the final product of that. And so as a writer, that's something that I am coming to terms with too is not getting too attached to certain things. The difficult thing for me with that is making sure I don't get too attached to characters. And
I'm the
meaning,
exact same way.
yeah. I could cut a song, but with regards to a character, cutting them out, that was a tough decision. I had to cut one character from our first reading to this second reading we did, and that was tough. And I might, as I develop the show, might need to cut another one or two. I'm hoping I don't, but that's the tough thing, because you fall in love with your characters and you really start to enjoy the actor who's performing as the character too.
Totally.
So those are all evolutionary things, but that's what I look for to answer your question in
Yeah,
a
no,
long-winded sense.
that's so helpful and so interesting to me, because as someone who has like grown up as like an actor and a vocalist and a dancer, I did a lot of choir work, and so I'm very familiar with like, okay, I know how music works, but in terms of creating it, that's just so out of like my wheelhouse that I'm like, how does even one go about doing this, let alone editing it? So it was so cool hearing you speak to that. And we've gone a little bit past our time today, but that's just because we were both so excited to chat. Really quick, is there any place that people should like look out for in terms of supporting the startup, or is it just your own social media? How can people find you?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Specifically with the startup, that's actually, in addition to a workshop production, putting together marketing materials is going to be a next big step.
Yeah.
So there's nowhere specific like a website or an Instagram page that you could go to or anything with regards to the startup yet. There will be at some point. But if you want to find out more about me, probably the best place is my website, which is patrick-mcandrew.com. It's important to have that dash in there. If you go to just patrickmcandrew.com, you'll find this yoga teacher who I'm sure he's amazing, but you'll quickly find out, wait, that's not the Patrick McAndrew I'm looking for.
That's not that guy.
So it's patrick-mcandrew.com. And then you could also find me on Instagram as well, which is at Patrick_McAndrew. And
Perfect.
I have, as you can imagine, mixed feelings about social media specifically. So you might not always be able to find me on Instagram. We'll see, TBD. But as of now, you can. So those are probably the best places you could find me, is my website and Instagram.
Amazing. Well, I will put all the links to those things below in the description of this video and that kind of thing, as well as send me any updates on the startup, and I will make sure to add that too, to make sure
thank
it's
you
all
so much.
up to date. Of course.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and tell my social medias in the meantime. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Lora_Marjoram, as well as my website, www.loramarjoram.com. You can find Overtures, this show that you're listening to right now, on Instagram at Overtures Show. That's where all the updates on upcoming guests and places to submit questions will be located. And you can also find us on YouTube here on Overtures Show, as well as on Spotify and Apple Music. I'm slowly working my way through the back catalog because the YouTube channel came before the podcast. So we're working through it, but it eventually will all make it there. My next stream will be actually this upcoming Tuesday, making up with Alexandra Rose DeAngelis. We had to reschedule her episode a couple weeks ago because I unfortunately had COVID, but we get to talk to them on Tuesday at 11 a.m. So I hope you come join us. It'll be a lot of fun. But Patrick, now that we're at the end here, do you have any final thoughts for Viewers Live and in the future?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Any final thoughts? I think no matter what you're doing, assuming that all your listeners are probably involved in theater in some capacity.
In some way.
Yeah. I think just always make sure that fire is lit. And I think that, I'm not trying to sound like too profound or anything, but
No,
I think
you're good.
I think that so long as you continue to keep that fire lit in no matter what way it is. So whether it is working a full-time job as a production manager, whether it's working as a part-time, sometime, all the time, maybe no time job as an actor, or
Mhm.
whether it is as a part-time costume designer, or whether it is building sets at your local community theater and you're doing something completely different for your full-time work. I think that never let anyone tell you that you are like a failure or anything like that if you decide to pursue theater in a way that is maybe different from what you initially decided on. I think so long as you just continue to have that fire lit and that you're engaged in it in some way, no matter what it is, so long as you're involved with it in some way and it's something that you enjoy and you're passionate about, I think that's all you need to do,
Yeah.
and to continue to have that fire lit. So I'll leave you all with that.
No, that's perfect. I always love it because people will drop like the biggest nuggets of wisdom right at the end. And I'm like, cool, didn't expect that coming. And it's fantastic. So thank you for those amazing words and advice. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful day and we'll talk to you all later. So bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for having me, Laura.